Sudan's Omar al-Bashir coasted to an easy victory in a highly controversial presidential vote. But how will the international community deal with an indicted president? And which way now for a country heading for potential partition? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. President Omar al-Bashir retains power in Sudan. This was the country's first multi-party polls in 24 years. Sudan's election commission announced the results on Monday.
The winner for the presidency is Omar Hassan al-Bashir from the National Congress Party. He got 68%, and the number of votes he got were 6,901,694 votes. And Omar Hassan al-Bashir is the elected president of the republic.
About 16 million Sudanese were registered to vote in the presidential elections that began on April the 11th. And many predicted the result right from the start, saying that al-Bashir was virtually unchallenged and unmonitored. Some of Sudan's main opposition parties withdrew from the elections and boycotted the vote, alleging fraud, a concern expressed by both local and international observers.
It's obvious that these elections will fall short of international standards that are normally expected of advanced democracies in the holding of elections. And Sudan's obligations for genuine elections, in many respects, the people's expectations have not been met.
Well, joining me now on the programme in Khartoum, Ghazi Suleiman. He's a lawyer at the Sudanese High Court. Also in Khartoum, Hafiz Mohammed. He's the Director of Justice Africa. That's an NGO promoting social justice across the continent. And in Oxford, England, Douglas Johnson. He's the author of The Root Causes of Sudan's Civil Wars. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside Story. Mr. Johnson, can I come to you first in England? How should the world react now to this election result, despite, as what we heard from the former American President Jimmy Carter and other EU observers, saying that it didn't quite meet international standards?
Well, it certainly didn't meet international standards, and there are some cases where there's a big question whether it even met national standards. For instance, in Darfur, where there are only partial elections, there are a number of results that are still being contested, both in the north and in the south. And given the way in which opposition candidates, even before they withdrew, were not able to present their positions in the national media, I don't think that you can consider this as having been conferring any greater legitimacy on Omar al-Bashir than he had before.
Hafiz Mohammed, can I come to you with the same question? How should the international community react to this result now?
I think the international community have already decided. I think they're looking for the election as a step for completion of the CPA, and they're looking forward to January 2011 for the referendum. I think the international community already made their mind. The Americans said the election is not free and fair, but we're going to accept it as a step forward to complete a comprehensive peace agreement. I think they are accepting it because they want the referendum to go ahead in 2011, and they don't want it to be delayed. That is the main reason why they accept it. But it's clear that they know that this election is not free and fair, and is not representing the will of the Sudanese people. And that is the case. I think and the credibility of the whole process is really in serious doubt.
Mr. Suleiman, yes. Let me come to you in Khartoum. Would it be correct to say that while the international community and even monitors criticised the way the election was held in certain parts, the bigger prize, the bigger picture is about moving forward towards the referendum?
You see, I can't say the election which we have it here in Sudan, it is absolutely according to the international standard. But pertaining to Africa and the Middle East, I can say this is one of the best elections in Africa and the Middle East. It is transparent, it is honest, and it was fair. You see, the only reservation that in certain parts of the Sudan, very small areas in Darfur, we were not able to have the elections. But generally, this election, in my opinion, and all the Sudanese people, they are evident of this, it was fair and honest.
I agree with what you're saying, sir, that you disagree with the election, and the election is over, the results are out, we know what's going...
This is very objective, this is very objective. And we have called the international community to monitor it. We have inserted in the election law that we should call the international community to come and monitor it. Do you think if the Sudanese people, they have any other intention, ill intention, they would have called the international community to monitor it? We want also the international community to be fair and honest with us. Our elections are fair, honest, and I don't think that anybody has got substantial evidence that there is something which is not correct.
OK, Hafiz Mohammed, you're smiling wryly there, also in Khartoum, listening to what Mr. Suleiman has to say briefly. Before we get bogged down in the whole, again, the election process, which has happened, we have a result now. Do you just want to respond to what Mr. Suleiman has said?
Yeah, I think I'll show you one thing. If I voted as a candidate and my family, and I couldn't actually, my vote and my family vote is not counted, that is a serious question. I think for the Ghazi as lawyer to say that, I think he just, you know, I don't know, but it is serious. If I voted and my vote is not counted, it's a problem, because I voted for myself, my family voted for me, and my vote is not there. What happened to the boxes? That is the question. We have monitors all through. I've been in Khartoum all through monitoring before that, and there is a very serious breaches to the international standards, and it's clear from our local observers, from international observers. You know, there is a serious breaches, and that is very clear. I am in Khartoum. I've been in Khartoum for almost 2.5 months, and I'm following that. And for Ghazi, I think that is something for him, but everyone knows what is going on anyway.
Douglas Johnson, let me bring you in here. You know, differing opinions from what these two men obviously live and work and have seen what goes on in Sudan. The bigger picture is, of course, we move on, and in, 7 or 8 months' time, we have the next stage of the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, and that's a referendum on the potential possibility of secession of the South. How big a task now ahead is there for the incumbent president?
Well, I think there's an immense task ahead for not only for the incumbent president, but for the government that is going to be formed, both in the national government and the governments in the south and in Blue Nile State and in southern Kordofan. Because although a referendum law has been agreed and passed, there are a number of issues that have to be settled before that referendum can take place. And what you also have to remember is that the composition of the National Assembly has changed with this election, with the boycott of the election by a number of the northern parties, and with the refusal of the SPLM to contest seats in the north. You now have an overwhelming National Congress Party majority in the Assembly, and they could, as they have in the past, try to pass laws to change what has been agreed in the referendum, and could upset the smooth running of the last few months of the CPA.
Hafiz Mohammed, if I can come to you then, if there is such a big task ahead, what we've seen since last Thursday are clashes now on the border from the south with SPLM armed fighters and what is being described as farmers in the north. Do you think as time gets closer to this referendum in January, we're going to see more and more of this type of skirmish and fighting?
Yes, I think that is a problem. I think we have a very muddy way ahead. You know, it's not only in South Darfur. That used to be a very peaceful area. We have ABA problems. We have the demarcation of ABA is a problem. The Messeri are saying they are not going to accept the demarcation and they are going to fight it, and that is going to be a problem. There is another areas of which need demarcation not yet being actually settled, and that is a problem. I think we have a lot of problems to sort, and the way ahead and the coming time is going to be very difficult for Sudan. Hopefully, we'll be able to get out of it, you know, peacefully and and quickly. But we have a lot of problems ahead, and it's really need the resolve and the determination to overcome it.
So what challenges lie ahead for the incumbent president of Sudan? Firstly, working towards a referendum that will decide the future of the south of the country will top the agenda. The president will need to ensure the country does not spiral into a civil war like the one that ended with the Comprehensive Peace Agreement of 2005. The ICC indictment against al-Bashir is likely to resurface and will definitely pose a challenge. And of course, the unresolved issue of Darfur will need to be addressed. Tell me how you think the government are now going to proceed with trying to get all sides, or certainly try to proceed with those groups in the south of the country as they work together towards this referendum in January. Do you think it will be trouble-free?
Definitely it will be trouble-free, because the referendum, it is an agreed about, you see, solution for the running war in southern Sudan since our independence. You see, Omar al-Bashir, who is elected the president of the Sudan today, he is the signatory of the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. He is the most eligible person to resolve the conflict in southern Sudan. And I know that it is going to be peaceful referendum, and northern Sudanese are going to respect the decision of southern Sudan. There will be no war. There will be no war between the south and the north. But I would like to make it very clear that Abyei was never peaceful since 1986. During al-Mahdi, when he was the prime minister, there was a civil war in Abyei area, you see. Abyei was never peaceful as now. Now, these days, it is peaceful, because they know there is an agreement about Abyei. You see, we have resolved the problem of southern Sudan, of all the civil wars, and we are deciding to resolve the question of Darfur. If southern Sudanese will vote for secession from the north, this is their right. There will be no war. On the contrary, we are going to celebrate this occasion with them in Juba.
Do you think it will be that easy, Mr. Johnson, if what Mr. Suleiman is saying, that by the time they vote in January and there is a positive vote perhaps for a secession, that there'll be celebrations on the streets of Khartoum and elsewhere in the country?
Well, I don't know what people will be celebrating about. We'll wait until we see how the vote comes out. I mean, there are serious issues that Hafiz talked about along the border. There have been allegations made about continuing support for dissident militias in the south by the state security organ. If none of these issues are resolved, it's not going to be a peaceful referendum. So I think that one has got to look very carefully. I would hope that what Mr. Suleiman says is correct, that it will be peaceful and that it will be a reflection of the voice of the people and that it will be welcomed as a resolution to a very long-standing problem. But I don't think that we can take that for granted.
OK, let's just bring in now, away from the election, the other issues that the president has to cope with. Then, Hafiz Mohammed, we have the ICC indictment against President al-Bashir. And certainly for the last perhaps few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, the United States has been very quiet, and some human rights groups are saying that the USA has taken its eye off the ball and not really put pressure to have this ICC indictment implemented in any way. I mean, how do you see the situation there? Did the US take their eye off the ball so that this election could go off peacefully?
I think, as I said before, the USA is looking for the referendum in January 2011, and they want everything to be quiet and peaceful for that to happen. You know, that is their main concern. And as I said it clearly, that they will deal with the government because of that, not because of any other things. But I think the question of the ICC is going to be there. It's going to curtail his movement as president. You know, he cannot travel to and address the UN General Assembly. He cannot go to Europe, and it's going to be a problem. But I think there is a lot of challenges. You know, a lot of challenges ahead facing the country. Darfur is not being resolved, and I don't actually see any way out out now is still from Darfur. It's still the crisis is deepened and there is no way out. And I think he's facing a lot of challenges. But I hope that if we can approach this election united and then face all this problem together as Sudanese, is far better than just having one party controlling everything. I think he won more than Nimeri when he was just running himself. I don't think that is going to solve the problem.
Mr. Suleiman, what do you think, or how do you think the Sudanese government and President al-Bashir will react if there is pressure put on it by the United States, or if it is seen in Khartoum that the United States is trying to garner support for the ICC indictment against the president?
Somebody said that one party is controlling everything. One party is not controlling everything. One party is elected by the Sudanese people to control everything. This is what the Sudanese people, they want. You see, the National Congress, they have won the elections. We have to be honest with ourselves. Number two, in my opinion, any national leader who has the overwhelming support of his people, like the support which is now in the pocket of Omar Hassan Ahmed al-Bashir, the support of 70% of the Sudanese people, he doesn't care about the ICC. In fact, myself being a lawyer, and I am an international lawyer, I am a common law lawyer, I think the ICC, it is a political organ. It is not a court. It is not a proper court. You see, this is, in my opinion, Omar Hassan Ahmed al-Bashir, or like all the other Sudanese, we don't care about the ICC. And in particular, the president, Omar Hassan Ahmed al-Bashir, he has now the overwhelming support of his people. So he doesn't care what is going on. And I don't think he needs to travel. He needs to travel. Strong. Didn't travel from China until his death.
But okay, I'm going to bring Douglas Johnson in here, sir. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to bring you in here because President Bashir can't travel everywhere, even though Mr. Suleiman, of course, is trying to make the point that he can, and that the ICC indictment is an international document that, of course, requires him to be arrested if he should land in a country that is a signatory. I mean, it's quite problematic, is it not, at this present moment in time, to wonder what the President will do?
Oh, well, it is quite problematic. He has been restricted in the areas where he can travel, even within the African continent. I think that this is a fact. And I don't think that there's going to be any international movement to suspend the indictment or in any other way withdraw it, as long as there is no actual progress over Darfur. That is the issue that the ICC indictment is about. If there is no real progress over Darfur, I do not see how countries will be able to try to have that indictment put aside. So it does raise a real question of how the Darfur problem can be addressed either internationally or internally to be able to get beyond what has happened in the past and build a real foundation for peace, but also for justice. This is one of the problems, I think, that is besetting the Sudan. There have been terrible wars, and while there have been peace agreements, there's been no real movement for justice for the people who have been displaced and affected by the wars. And I think that this is something that only the Sudanese can address. And as long as they don't, I think all of these peace agreements are going to be a little bit unstable.
Hafiz Mohammed, can I bring you in there? Would you agree with Douglas Johnson there that Darfur is perhaps, of all of the issues that Sudan has to face, right on top of the list?
Yes, I think it is not only the issue of the ICC, but Darfur is actually caused a lot of problems to the implementation of the CPA, because most of the donors actually refuse to honor their commitment to Oslo agreement that they are going to fund the CPA and people get the definite of the peace because of Darfur. I think Darfur is a serious problem. Anyone who actually denying that is just, have nothing to do with reality. I think he just live in cloud cuckoo land. I think this is a real problem problem we have to address. We have to resolve it, and I think we can only resolve it in Sudan by a joint common understanding of all Sudanese to move together to try and resolve this problem. It's not a one-party problem to say that we've been elected by 7 or 90%, and I don't think that is the case. I think this is a serious problem, need to be addressed genuinely and resolved. Otherwise, it's going to hinder and stop many progress in the country, economically and socially and politically.
Sorry, Mr. Mohammed, I appreciate what you were saying there. Mr. Suleiman, can I bring you in here? One of the other issues, perhaps, is if there is a referendum and Sudan is split north and south, some of its neighbours won't be too happy or perhaps feel uncomfortable in not only having to deal previously with one government, but they will have to deal with two very different governments should the country split. And then issues of, for example, water rights. A recent meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh failed over how water rights would be divided by those countries who share the River Nile.
Yes, you mean the water of the Nile. You see, this is you are definitely correct, but this is not our problem. It is a problem of these countries. You see, this is not our. But we have to stand with the agreement which we have signed in January 2005. We have to give Southern Sudanese the right to determine what do they want. Do you want to keep unity with the North, or they want to form their own government? I think most of the Sudanese people now in the North, they want to meet this promise. Number two, I laugh sometimes when people they speak about progress in Darfur. I think the progress in Darfur is now evident that 75% of the Darfurians, they have participated in this election. Darfur is more peaceful than Afghanistan and than Iraq.
Well, I shall quickly come to Mr. Johnson there in England. I'll just quickly come to Mr. Johnson in England. Is Darfur more peaceful than Afghanistan?
And Iraq.
I think that these are false comparisons, because one of the reasons why Mr. Suleiman says that 75% of the people of Darfur participate in the election is that a lot of people who did not come originally from Darfur but who have settled there since have been given Sudanese nationality in order to vote. But the Darfur refugees who are outside in Chad, of course, haven't voted. So I think that's a very false statistic. And going back to your question about neighboring countries, I think Egypt, of course, is worried about an independent southern Sudan. Well, of course, Egypt was worried about an independent Sudan back in the 1950s. But because of the war of 22 years, the southern Sudan is now more integrated into the economy of the region than it used to be when before the war began. It has strong connections with Ethiopia, with Kenya, with Uganda. These connections are growing with the transportation infrastructure linking the southern Sudan with these countries. There are even proposals for Ethiopia to sell electrical power to the southern Sudan. So I don't think that you're going to find all of the Sudan's neighbors worried about an independent southern Sudan, because many of them have already been dealing with the SPLM as if it were the government of an independent southern Sudan. It's really Egypt who is concerned about a new coalition of upriver states who might affect the balance of the Nile Waters Agreement, and they're the ones who are most worried about an independent southern Sudan.
Well, I'm sure that we'll be returning to this subject in the run-up to that referendum. To all of my guests, both in Khartoum and in Oxford, England, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. And of course, we welcome your suggestions and comments. Please do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company.